Seems to me if you've got somebody to help you as you weep, maybe this is just too philosophical. Maybe I'm trying to combine things that can't be combined, but it makes sense to me.
Is it too on the nose to say that 2020 has been a year of frustrating, unexpected interruptions? I mean, that's an oversimplification if there ever was one.
I can't do it.
I think it's easy to kind of write off Mr. Rogers as a sweaters in the summertime, kindly old man, but that misses the fact that he was willing to grapple with challenging topics.
But the tent, why didn't you let them set it up for you?
Well, children need to know that even when adults make plans, sometimes they don't turn out the way we'd hoped.
Mm-hmm.
The parallels between what is happening in the real world and what is happening inside the neighborhood are uncanny and undeniable.
I want to ask you, what does assassination mean?
In 1963, he spoke about the Kennedy assassination. In 1986, he spoke about the Challenger explosion.
Every time we went through a national or international tragedy, my impulse was always to call Fred.
This is really important. People listen to you.
He even came out of retirement to address the nation about 9/11. Mr. Rogers wasn't afraid of the dark.
I've been wondering if I was a mistake.
Or rather, he wasn't afraid to admit his fear of the dark. So, since we are starved for emotional leadership, and his voice is missed, I have a question, which is, what would Mr. Rogers say about the 2020 coronavirus pandemic? One caveat, though. I think it's easy to project our worldview onto the icons of the past. If we squint, we can find whatever we want in nearly any historical figure. So to attempt to avoid oversimplification, I want to try and gather core themes that arise in his life by looking at a broad range of sources. First, of course, the Tom Hanks biopic based on the real-life relationship he had with the journalist Tom Junot. Next, the documentary featuring many of his family members. Two notable speeches he gave, one at Dartmouth and another famously at his induction to the TV Hall of Fame. And finally, listening to some of what people had to say at his memorial service. This will get us to a few core themes. The foundation, of course, is the basic care and kindness that he shows. This largely is something we already intuitively get about him. It's part of why we write him off, because we think we can stop there and say that we sort of got the idea. To push against that, though, in this video, we'll look specifically at the relationship between fantasy and reality, the world of make-believe, his Christianity, his role as a minister, his theology, his philosophy, the preferential option for the poor, as well as his emotional intelligence, his honoring of people's need to process their feelings. Healthy expressions of emotion are a paragon of Mr. Rogers' life. Time, silence, catharsis, etc. Finally, part of how we're going to do that, how we're going to understand him, is to look at his critiques of the media landscape of his time. Public television was arriving on the scene as he was coming to his sort of national fame. There's a lot of similarities between how media works now and how media worked then, and so a lot of the critiques are going to be the same. So if we do this, we'll have a strong enough foundation of who he was as a person to make some justified guesses as to what he might have said. And spoiler alert, I think some of them are worth reflecting on, especially as this year has been very challenging for many reasons, that being an understatement. We'll start with Tom Hanks and the cafe scene.
Would you do something with me, Lloyd? It's an exercise I like to do sometimes.
Okay, so for some context here, This is Lloyd, the character based on Tom Juneau, the real-life reporter who famously wrote Can You Say Hero in the late 90s. This scene is where Lloyd is finally coming to terms with the grief and anger he's holding on to for reasons I'll not spoil. Tom Hanks, playing Mr. Rogers, is about to ask Lloyd for 60 seconds of silence.
We'll just take a minute and think about all the people who loved us into being.
No, incidentally, this is something he did all the time in real life. We'll look specifically at the TV Hall of Fame speech when we look at the critique of contemporary media landscapes. But when the silence starts, the filmmakers make 3 moves that I just love. First, everyone in the restaurant stops, as if in reverence to the sacredness of this moment. Everyone puts their silverware down. But then the camera pans around the room and look at the people. We see real people from Fred Rogers' life. This is Margie Whitmer, the producer of the neighborhood show. This is Joanne Rogers, his actual wife. David Newell, who played Mr. McFeely. The room is filled with real people. And as if this isn't enough, Tom Hanks then breaks one of the cardinal rules of cinema and looks directly at the camera. And this is no accidental gaze. We dwell on it. We zoom in. We hold for an uncomfortable amount of time. We watch him stare out of the screen and seemingly into our souls. Yo-Yo Ma, incidentally, a friend of his, can attest to the disarming power of Fred's authentic attention. See the documentary for more details. But he looks at the camera as if to say, yes, this is a performance. This is a story, a replication, an escape. But it is through story that we can sometimes find the courage to face the very real feelings we are working so hard to avoid.
Left Fred's house into the neighborhood of make-believe.
This intuitive grasp of the emotional potency of story defines part of how Mr. Rogers sees the world. It's the reason for the puppets. Now, there's a lot here, so I think I'm going to let him explain.
It's a lot easier, even as an adult, for me to have Daniel say,
I'm really scared. Do you think maybe you could give me a hug?
you know? That would be hard for me to say. I'm really scared. Do you think you could give me a hug?
The puppet in every character is an escape you can identify with, an external place to see a part of yourself you normally wouldn't allow yourself to look at. People, and in particular men, struggle to express fear, to express vulnerability, but children need to learn how to do this. We need to learn how to do this, and Fred knew this. As an aside, I think this is part of why so many of us love comic book movies. They're an escape. We can see the best and worst parts of ourselves in these stories. And when the range of feelings men are allowed to express is so prohibitively small, these movies give us space for catharsis in a culture that really wants us only to express our pain in the form of anger. But there's another caveat here, and it's a big one. The world of make-believe can be a useful place to process feelings so long as there is a clear division between fantasy and reality, between make-believe and truth.
Anything could happen in make-believe, but make-believe was not real. I mean, there was a distinction. Fred never appeared in make-believe. Actors did, the puppets did.
In 2003, at Mr. Rogers' memorial service, a philanthropist colleague of his, Teresa Hines, delivered some relevant remarks. After a powerful story about how Mr. Rogers was able to use the power of his words to get through to a nonverbal autistic boy, she shares this.
And that line between reality and make-believe is increasingly blurred in our society. And it isn't either kind or a wise gift to children, creating as it does many false standards, expectations, and role models. Fred honored the need that children have for a real world that they can feel safe in, and a make-believe world that they can escape to, and the ability to tell which is which.
Everything on the show was intentional, and this distinction was by design. Yes, look to story for relief, but consequences when the line is blurred are real. We'll come back to this. But before we do, it looks like half the people who are watching these videos are outside of the US, which is amazing. But it looks like the vast majority who are here are not subscribed. So if you wouldn't mind clicking that button and maybe the bell, it would help the channel out a lot. Thanks.
I think that those who would try to make you feel less than who you are, I think that's the greatest evil.
When I look at the camera, I think of one person.
The space between the television screen and whoever happens to be receiving it, I consider that very holy ground.
I believe enough hasn't been said about Fred Rogers' heavy theological mind, or that he was an ordained Presbyterian minister, or about his deep, deep faith and trust in God. For Fred's calling card to his TV children, like the 7-year-old kid said, "I like you just the way you are," was no accident. For I believe Fred took his TV text right out of the Bible.
This wasn't a passing or incidental aspect of his identity. He was an ordained minister, Reverend Rogers. It was foundational to his worldview.
That commitment led him to enroll at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, where he was a classmate of hundreds over the 8 years it took him to complete his degree as a Master of Theology.
But what was the theology? Right? I think it's easy, as before, to wrap him up as sweaters in the summer guy, except this time like kindly Christian grandpa. He believed love thy neighbor, love yourself, and we get it, move on, right? But no.
There were times when he thought, will people ever understand that I'm not just a klutzy guy who's fumbling around in a 50s living room with weird curtains?
The show was deeper than this, right? I said at the start that it's too easy to project ourselves onto our heroes. It is true that love formed the foundation of his theology, but if we say love in too vague or undefined a way, we run the risk of simplifying away the very things that we need to learn from him. Worse, the monosyllabic proclamation, love, it's true, it's obviously true, it's trivially true, right? Like you're reading a Hallmark card at me when I asked for John of the Cross or Teresa of Avila. I'm not a theologian and I don't pretend to be, but I've lived most of my life academically adjacent to theology. The main source for my arrival video was a theologian. Fred Rogers didn't care about the pain of children incidentally or accidentally. He cared about their pain because at the core of his Christian worldview was the belief in the intrinsic dignity of the human person. I think it's worth dwelling on this, right? This distinction between extrinsic and intrinsic is important, but we don't need a book to understand it. He put it in a song for us. It's You I Like.
And I'd like to give you the words of that song right now. It's you I like. It's not the things you wear. It's not the way you do your hair, but it's you I like. The way you are right now, the way down deep inside you. Not the things that hide you, not your caps and gowns, they're just beside you. But it's you.
It isn't just love. It's a specific form of love that is unearned. No one needs to earn their intrinsic value, their intrinsic dignity. So I'll actually repeat this quote.
And if you don't believe that everyone has inherent value, you might as well go against the fundamental notion of Christianity.
But there's an image that I can't get away from that you may have seen that sort of sums it up.
The way down deep inside you, not the things that hide you, not your fancy chair.
Part of why this episode in particular is famous is because when Fred was inducted into the TV Hall of Fame, the Academy surprised Mr. Rogers. Oh, well, I'll just let you watch it.
My pleasure.
What a surprise.
It's an honor to be here tonight, to be part of your this proud moment. You know, when you tell people that it's you I like, you know that you really mean it.
As the camera pans around, everybody's crying. I cried the first time I saw it. But why? Why is this image so powerful? I think it's because it captures the second theological theme of Fred's life. It's one we all get intuitively, but don't necessarily always say out loud. In the words of ministers and in his tradition, There's a scriptural line where God says direct to his followers, "Whatever you did for the least of my people, you did for me." Tom Hanks does justice to this in many scenes throughout the movie, one in particular from the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Oh, I like that.
Terribly sorry, Fred. We need to start.
Christianity as Fred lived it put this on display. Now, I'm not making this video because I'm like good at this and telling you should be too. I'm making this because this is one of the things that Fred has to teach us. It's one of the things he seemed to know so well. And it was so in his personality that the second Jeff rolled out in his chair on that stage, we all were instantly moved at the reminder that this was who he was.
Can you support me as I say my few words?
Absolutely.
To jargonize this, theologians refer to this as a preferential option for the poor. That word matters a lot. Preferential. It seems to be part of how Fred lived. Final theological thing. I think Fred would affirm intrinsic human dignity. I know it. He says it lots of times. I think he would affirm the preferential option for the poor. These led him to be a radically welcoming soul. But I also think that he would reject a few things.
Fame is a four-letter word. And like tape or Zoom or face or pain or life or love, what ultimately matters is what we do with it.
We don't have space to get into it here, but I'm pretty sure Fred would reject the so-called prosperity gospel. This more or less is the belief that you can pray your way to wealth and influence. This is a horrendously unethical way of viewing the universe. It has no theological or practical basis. It's moral snake oil. I don't know how it has taken so much hold of so many minds, but in my view, it's a pernicious moral failure of contemporary Christianity. This argument is maybe more complex than I have space for now, but this worldview that the good are rewarded in this lifetime can lead people to make backwards inferences that anyone who is powerful must somehow deserve it or have earned it. I've talked about this in other videos, but in moral practice, this amounts to claiming that might makes right, which as far as I can tell is the antithesis of the least of my people.
Without love is reckless and abusive, and that love without power is sentimental and anemic.
Okay, deeper rabbit hole than I expected. Let's end this section with a speech of his.
I feel that those of us in television are chosen to be servants. It doesn't matter what our particular job. We are chosen to help meet the deeper needs of those who watch and listen, day and night.
Okay, we'll pause here. He's about to transition to something we'll come back to later. Great.
You know, death is something many of us are uncomfortable speaking about. But to die is to be human. And anything human is mentionable. Anything mentionable is manageable. Anything mentionable is manageable.
We open this essay with a tent as a mini allegory for every awful thing that has happened this year, everything we didn't plan. Then we looked at the cafe and how when we can't see ourselves exactly, we need occasionally to find our feelings in stories. But what we glossed over was the silence itself.
We'll just take a minute and think about all the people who loved us into being.
In the film, and in both speeches, and even in the neighborhood show itself, Fred Rogers would often ask for a minute of reflection, for you to think of others.
Who has helped you love the good that grows within you? Let's just take 10 seconds.
But I don't think that I have it in me to ask that of you right now, because this has been a year of grief, not gratitude. We've lost lives. We've lost our daily lives. Theaters, restaurants, sports, proms, concerts, weddings. We've lost athletes and leaders, family and friends. And in so many ways, we have been prevented from grieving for them. Literally, sometimes, with funerals rushed or distanced or digital. Or we've been unable to grieve because time and tweets have continued fire-hosing our souls with each unwelcome daily dose of newly minted catastrophe. How can we hold each other up when we can't even hold each other? How can we bear to think of them when those who have loved us into being are the very same people we have lost so suddenly. But anything mentionable is manageable. So it is, I think, in the spirit of Fred Rogers to ask you for 1 minute to feel whatever it is you might need. Maybe you aren't ready to share with anyone else what it is you're feeling, but I hope you can borrow his courage to mention it to yourself all the same. That's the thing about intrinsic dignity. You and your feelings are part of the everyone who happens to have it. So I'll let him speak for all of us.
Before I begin, I'd like you to know that I recognize that you have had many days, particularly during these last several months, that have been far from beautiful. You've had a painful time, and you've handled it with dignity, and it's a great privilege for me to be with you all. Whomever you've been thinking about, imagine how grateful they must be that during your silent times you remember how important they are to you.
Okay, we've covered a lot. There's a lot more that we could talk about, particularly with regard to media landscapes and how those relate to our understanding of sensationalism and misinformation, and even the Capitol riots, right? And how we can understand all of those things through these theological lenses and the lens of fantasy and reality connected to his critique of the media landscape. I'm going to move that to part 2. So if you are interested in that, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell. If you don't know, you might not see the video unless you hit the bell. So whatever algorithms. But with that out of the way, thank you for watching. This was an incredibly interesting video for me to make. And I feel like I've learned a lot even just making it. So I hope that you've gotten to learn something too. Hit the like button if you can, share it with a friend if you can. Those things really help out the channel, and there's some links below to click if you're interested in supporting this channel in other ways. So great, thank you. See you in the next one.